Hi, I'm Margaret from Heidi and Lana. Today I'm going to show you how to seam possibility. So to begin with, I have both panels laying side by side here on the table with side A facing up. I have two different colors of panels and then I'll be sewing with a third color just so that you can see what I'm doing a little bit easier. But you'll want to make sure that you sew with the same color of yarn as what your garment is knit in. So I have mine just pinned in one place. You'll have two pins, one for your starting and one for your stopping point. But for this demonstration, it'll be a little bit easier for you to see what I'm doing with just the one pin. So I've overlapped the garter stitch borders and then lined up the slip stitch edge with the first column of stockinette stitches here. So I'm going to be using the slip stitch edge to sew and then also the left side of the stockinette column, and on the slip stitch side I'm going to use just the bottom loop. So you can see here how there's the top and the bottom, so I'm just going to use the bottom loop. So I've cut a length of yarn here and I'm going to come up under the slip stitch on the left panel, and you'll want to leave a 6-inch tail for weaving in at the end. And then I'm going to go directly across to the corresponding stockinette stitch and just go under the left leg. And then I'm going to go up one row and go under the left leg and then go over to the corresponding slip stitch. Since when you were knitting the pieces you slip every other row, but these stitches would have been knit every row, you're going to need to skip some of the stockinette stitches to keep the rows lined up. So on this next one here, instead of going down into the next one, you can see how that would kind of angle down. I'm going to skip that one and go across to this one here. And I'm going to go up one and go directly across. And I'm going to skip here on this next row too. I'm going to skip this one and go directly across to this one. I'm going to go up and across to this one. Let's do one more here. I'm going to skip this one and go directly across to this one. Then when you've reached your stopping point, I like to go back over and go around this stitch again, just to secure it. Now I'm going to flip the panels over, and you can see here this is the part that we're going to sew down on this side. And so instead of cutting another piece of yarn, I'm just going to weave this piece of yarn over to where I'm going to be sewing this seam. So it's going to be right along this edge. So I'm just going to catch just the top layer of these stitches so that it doesn't show on the other side, and just go across the garter border. Just like that. And then we'll be sewing this direction on this side, and we're going to be using the bottom leg of the slip stitches on the right panel, and then we're going to be using the first row of purl bumps right after the garter stitches here. So this row right here, you can see here where the last garter stitch ends, and then that very next stitch right here is what we're going to be using on the left panel this time. So I'm going to go under that first purl stitch, and then I'm going to go directly across to the bottom leg of the slip stitch. And then instead of going into this side again, we're going to go right back over to the left panel, and just make sure you stay in that same column of purl bumps. I'm going to go up under that one, then come over here and go up under this one, and just keep repeating that process. Back to the left panel, and come over and catch the bottom leg of the slip stitch. And you're going to be sewing it clear the way back down into where you started on the other side. So it looks like I have a little bit further to go here. So here it looks like one more. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this side to make sure it's securely anchored. Is I'm going to come back over to this stitch and go through it one more time. Then I'm going to open this up and do the same thing as I did at this end, and I'm going to just take this tail, and this time I'm just going to go halfway across the garter border. So I'm just going to catch those just the top threads here, and go approximately halfway with this one, and then I'll thread my needle with the tail that we started with and go halfway across the garter border with this tail. And then I'm going to tie these in a knot. And you want this to be tight, but just make sure you don't pull it too tight as to where it's going to pucker the seam. So right about there. I've got a knot, and then I'm going to take both of the ends just one at a time, and I'm going to bury them in this double thickness of the garter placket. So I'm just going to go right up through it like this. And before I pull it through, I'll check to make sure it's invisible on both sides. I'll just pull that through. I would probably go through at least 2 or 3 inches. And then leaving about 1/4 of an inch, I'll trim that end, then kind of fuzz it up a little bit and pull on the fabric just to tuck that down in. And you can see you've got a nice invisible seam here. Then on side A, you'll want to kind of fluff up the slip stitch edge there, and then you've got a really nice faux button placket. Thanks so much for watching. You can find me on Ravelry, Instagram, and Facebook, all under Heidi and Lana. Happy knitting!